waiting, they magically appear. So I'm just going to kind of hope that happens. So, well, welcome to the final session of Citizens Academy. This is a very bittersweet moment, but I'm so excited that you have all put the time in to come here. On this session, we're doing budget and finance. And I feel this is a great final session because you've learned what the services are, you've gotten to see the people behind it and what they have to do. Now, how do we fund it all? How do we manage what gets funded and what doesn't? So that is a really great way to kind of wrap up our session. So before I introduce Mayor Walsh, would like to give our land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge with respect the Onondaga Nation, firekeepers of the Haudenosaunee, the ancestral peoples, the indigenous peoples whose ancestral lands we now stand. And we'd like to thank our 2022 sponsors, National Grid, Syracuse University, FM Realty, and Pathfinder Bank. As we said today, unfortunately there was no tour due to lack of staff last minute, so the City Hall is very sad about that, but they have offered a makeup day. Please check your emails because I have a link that is asking people what day is best. So it looks like Monday's looking like the best one. And so when I have it, if we can get that filled out ASAP, then I can know when to ask them to reschedule. And if you guys would like to do that, I would like you to have that last tour. I think it'd be really, really great. And the building is beautiful. It has a lot of cool history, and you get to see where the people work, so you know what doors to knock on. So, anyway, for the session today, we are going to have our usual setup. We have a special guest speaker today, which is Mayor Ben Walsh, and he will give a quick 10-minute spiel, and we'll have time for a couple of 2 or 3 questions for him, and then we'll go into our usual session where I'll introduce each panelist. They'll speak for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we will do our Q&A until it's time to leave or until the snow buries us in with with apparently the last-minute storm. All right, so.
That's good.
And with that, I'm going to start your introduction, if that's all right. I'll keep it brief. That's been my goal this year. So. It is my pleasure to welcome Mayor Ben Walsh, the 54th mayor in the history of the city of Syracuse. Ben has played a lead role in some of the most transformational projects in Syracuse's recent history, from the creation of the Syracuse Land Bank to the successful redevelopment of the Syracuse Hotel. Ben has earned a reputation as a pragmatic and collaborative leader who brings the right people together to get the job done, and we are very happy to have him speak tonight at our Citizens Academy session. Please welcome Mayor Ben Walsh.
Thank you all. Welcome to City Hall. I'm really sorry we weren't able to give a tour. It's just things happen. But honestly, you're in the coolest part. This is the best room in the building. So I'm glad you could at least be in council chambers. It is a special building. It's near and dear to my heart for a number of reasons. First, I was probably about their age when I first entered this room. My father served on the Common Council, was the 3rd District Common Councilor, and then President of the Common Council. So I've got some pictures of me sitting up where Council President Hudson now sits when I was, again, about their age. Of course, I then served here first in City Hall as Deputy Commissioner of Neighborhood and Business Development. And so it's funny, when I stand in the back of the room, that's a very comfortable place for me because that's where I spent 6 years of my time during the minor administration during Common Council sessions. Now, as mayor, I don't really get to come up here that much. I do sit on the Joint Schools Construction Board with Council President Hudson, but besides that, I don't get to be in here very often, so happy to be in here with all of you. I thought, just given the amount of time, I would just share a few thoughts, give a little bit of context, which I think will hopefully be helpful for tonight's discussion, and then answer a few questions if I can. If you have any hard-hitting financial questions, I defer to our budget director over there, Tim Rudd, who you'll be hearing from shortly. But just general context, I'm right in between kind of 2 significant annual components of the city governance process. I delivered my State of the City in January, and I deliver our city budget a week from Monday, and so we are very much in the heat of budget season right now, putting it all together and getting it ready for the Common Council. And we're in this really interesting kind of dichotomy right now. I have always been bullish on the future of the city of Syracuse. I've never been more bullish about it. When you think about the opportunities that we have in front of us, I was next door at the State Office Building today getting a briefing from New York State DOT about the Interstate 81 project. Despite the ongoing litigation, they are moving full steam ahead, and they are legally allowed to move forward with the first few phases of the project. So we're going to see real work getting started this year. Actually, if you go, for anybody that drives up north, you might notice up around the 81-481 interchange, there's some trees being removed. That's the 81 project. It's happening. So buckle up. That's a almost $2.5 billion project, and that used to sound like a lot of money until Micron came along, and then we started talking about $100 billion, which is the investment that, again, is going right up there to the north of us. These are generational investments, and in the case of Micron, an investment that this nation has never seen. So our community is about to transform rapidly and radically, and having worked in local government long enough to know that any amount of change is hard. We are all going to be stretched and pressed to accommodate the changes that are going to be coming at us, and we want to maximize the community benefit of these changes. And so, when you look at where we're investing significantly, housing, we have a housing crisis now, and that's before thousands of new employees show up to work at Micron and all the other related opportunities. So we're making significant investments in housing. We're building new single-family owner-occupied housing. We're building rental, affordable housing. You think about some of the big projects, the former Syracuse Developmental Center site, we're talking upwards of 600 units of new housing. The new 15th Ward project in partnership with the Syracuse Housing Authority, we're talking about building over 1,000 units, including replacing all the existing public housing one for one and adding on top of that. So a lot of housing, a lot of infrastructure investment. We're trying to do as many dig once projects as possible, where we're replacing the water lines and the sewer lines and the utilities before we do the road, so we don't have to go back and dig. So we're making really significant investments. But the dichotomy I mentioned is at a time when we know that we are growing, and we know that we are going to continue to grow, and it's only going to accelerate. From a city governance perspective, as we grow, we need to deliver appropriate services to accommodate that growth. And based on the way our city government is funded, that's a significant challenge. As you'll hear from Tim, our if you look at our top three revenue sources, sales tax. Good news, it's been growing, and growing more rapidly than it has in a long time. Bad news, we have very little control over it. So that is volatile. Second, state aid. And with state aid, we have not seen an increase in state aid in nearly 15 years. When you look at the state budget and see how much they've grown over that same amount of time, it's a frustrating point for us, but it is something not unique to Syracuse. Every municipality can relate to that challenge. So we have zero control over that. The third is property taxes. We have some control over that. It's largely driven by property values, and again, the good news is property values are going up, and so we have been able to capture that increase. The other way is through property tax increases, and we know how people feel about that. So it's managing the day-to-day, immediate, real-time financial challenges that we have, but making sure that we're still investing in city services so we can accommodate the growth that's in front of us. And it is a challenge. One of our key objectives for this administration in the city is to be fiscally sustainable, and we are not yet. Our expenses continue to outpace our revenues, and we're working really hard to change that, but we're not there yet. Before I open up to questions, I'll leave you with what I probably should have started with, which is our vision statement. Hopefully some of you have heard me say it. One of the first things that we established in 2018 when we got started, and it guides us in everything that we do. It's our North Star. Our vision for Syracuse is to be a growing city that embraces diversity and creates opportunity for all. That is what we strive for every day. And finally, I just want to acknowledge my other colleagues here. I am blessed to serve with some really amazing public servants. I mentioned Common Council President Hudson already. She has been a great friend, a mentor in many ways, and a colleague, and somebody that I've learned from, and inspires me, and I'm grateful to serve with her. We have our city clerk here, Patricia McBride, who I've also had a chance to serve with for quite a while, and but only recently in her new capacity as clerk, and we're really thrilled to work with her. Of course, we have our budget director, Tim Rudd, who we could spend a whole other evening talking about our relationship, going from a common councilor who was the finance chair when I was first mayor to where we are today. But he's an exceptional budget director. I'd venture to say better budget director than counselor. That's just me, Tim. But
we're both huggers.
Yeah. But no, Tim does a great job for us. And of course, we have our colleagues here from around the county, and grateful for their leadership and their partnership as well. If we have any time, I probably spoke longer than I should have, but happy to answer any questions. Yes?
I have one.
Sure.
I'm Nancy Scott.
Nancy.
I'm retired teacher of vision impaired
wow.
after 30 years with Syracuse City Schools.
Cool.
And I'm proud to be here in this city still and to have more time to be able to
That's
learn
nice.
how I can contribute. And so this is a question that I posed to Jessica Lisi when we were here early setting up, and she said it would be a good one to put to you.
She's just putting the blame on me.
This is the question. I was at the train station helping to drop someone off last week, and bringing the bags in and so forth. There was a homeless man that came up to me. He was very forlorn and said he was looking for Building B. He needed to find this warming shelter he'd been staying in the last several nights. I said, "Where's Building B? Do you know the address?" No, he did not know the address. He knew his name, but it was obvious to me, coming from a special needs background, that this gentleman, he had special needs.
Yeah.
So I said, "Come with me, let's go in and talk to security and see what we can do." Security was very disgruntled, said, "Oh, he's here all the time. Get out." He said, "You don't belong here. Go." And the guy was headed toward the door to go back out in the cold.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I couldn't just not try to connect the dots.
Yeah.
So he gave me a number 211. He said, "Call this number."
Yep.
There were a battery of questions. The guy couldn't even answer them all.
Oh, boy.
So my question to you is, I could see there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
The man was, I said he's a human being. The man was handled very disrespectfully.
Yeah.
And there was nothing done by the security guard to help connect him so he could get to the homeless shelter.
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe there's a van that could, maybe there's a place to call. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you could help.
Yeah. But,
I would love to help with that.
Right.
I would, if I knew.
thank you. It's frustrating because I think that sometimes people, when you see somebody that's standing on a corner, or somebody that maybe that you're used to seeing around, people end up getting dehumanized, and we have to remind ourselves that the individuals that are struggling, that are out on the streets, are people's family members and friends, and likely in significant need of care, of health care. And we know many folks that are out on the streets are dealing with substance use issues. Many are dealing with mental health. Oftentimes those are very much connected. We have tried to invest in resources to support individuals in those situations. We work very closely with Onondaga County, which is where a lot of the funding for social services flows through. Some recent examples of that. I'm glad to hear you called 211. That is the purpose of 211 is to be a resource. I think that the challenge is it's not like 911. It's not people pick up right away and immediately deploy somebody out there. But we're trying to get closer to that. We are in the Syracuse Police Department, which oftentimes is who does end up getting called in response to a situation like that when that isn't ultimately what people need. We are we are working closely with the county. We have co-located mental health workers in the 911 center now to triage calls to determine maybe which ones aren't required for law enforcement and can be deployed for mental health purposes. We are looking to do more partnership with local organizations like Liberty Resources, the Rescue Mission, others to do more proactive street outreach and engage with those, the individuals where they are and try to get them connected with resources. We are very shortly going to be cutting the ribbon on the new Catholic Charities shelter out on Erie Boulevard, which was just recently completed, a beautiful facility, moving out of a pretty rough facility on the south side over where JMA recently built their facility. We've supported In My Father's Kitchen, which does day labor programming where they will put people to work for a day, give them a $50 stipend, and then importantly try to connect them to the services. So we are certainly doing our best, but as you experienced it, and as we all see anytime we walk out of our homes or our place of business, we're not doing enough. More needs to be done. But I think you tried to do the right thing, which is appreciated. Yes, sir. And then I'll look this way. Here, go ahead.
Thanks for being here.
Sure thing.
I'm Jim Riley, I live in the University.
Hey, Jim.
So the question is, what's really behind the efforts to stop the AED project? Why are these people? I mean, the judge, hey, he's not
Inside, don't look at me.
Right.
He's ruling on the law.
Yeah.
So he's doing the injunction. Okay.
Join that
Yeah.
suit.
These people, it's done. You've done all this.
Yeah.
If they took the time to read, they're not going to make a speech.
Yeah. No,
If they read the stuff.
you're speaking to me, Jim. Yeah. Yeah.
The secret review, they did everything. What is really behind it?
Yeah.
What are they trying to do?
I mean,
And get something out of the city, and they try to, I mean, this is like a political.
It depends. My answer depends on how skeptical and well, it's not. No, it's not. It's not about. I mean, the truth is, I don't know, Jim. The truth is, I'm guessing like you are, but maybe I have a little bit more insight. I mean, look, we know that. Ultimately, there are, I think, a significant part of the blowback has been from business interests that have based their business model on the current configuration of the highway. The mall, service stations, motels and hotels. I can't begrudge them for fighting against that because it is not, in some cases, in their best financial interests. That's not our job. Of course, we have to take everyone's interest into consideration, and the state does. But ultimately, we have to look comprehensively. To your point, look at all of the data. Look at the environmental impact. Look at the transportation data. So I think business interests are at the root of a lot of it. I think there are understandably there are people, and Mark's here from Fayetteville, people that are that are worried about their daily commutes and how it impacts their day-to-day lives. I don't begrudge them for worrying about that too, and it's hard to say, well, you need to think, beyond yourself. But to your point, I think the more people do familiarize themselves with the data, they see that a lot of their concerns are unwarranted. But I think it's a combination of specific business interests and a general resistance to change. That's the best I got. Yeah. Yeah, right there.
This way we can, it streams, so.
Hi, I'm Katie Seabohm, a school psychologist in the Syracuse City Schools. I live in the Meadowbrook neighborhood. I am curious about, I don't read whole news articles, I read headlines. But I am very curious. I think I recently read a headline about some unique approaches. No, I'm
Paying gang members to stay out of trouble.
No. I am encouraged by that. I'm curious about how you come to make those decisions to try those unique approaches.
Yeah.
Because I personally come from the background of if we keep putting money in things that we know don't work, why are we continuing to do that?
Yeah.
Particularly violence in and how it affects our youths.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious if you could speak a little bit more about that, to all of us. Just summarize the news articles. Totally.
Sure.
No, I'm just kidding.
It actually wasn't a bad article. It was a horrible headline, but it wasn't a bad article. I do want to just acknowledge that we do have a subject matter expert in the room, and Council President Hudson. This is something that she is. I'm not putting the program on you. That's on me. I got it. But in terms of having insight into the challenges that we're facing day to day, here's what I'll say. The headline was really unfortunate because what drives me and what drives us in terms of where we make our investments. You've heard me already mention data a few times. We look at evidence-based solutions, something that I'm sure you can appreciate in your line of work. So hopefully succinctly, the status quo is unacceptable, unsustainable. It ain't working. We are losing people every day to violence in our community, and it's tragic, and it's unconscionable, and it can't continue. So something has to change. And while we have made investments and certain things have worked marginally, we need to do more. So as we always do, and my team can attest to it. I say it at least once a day. Let's not reinvent the wheel, folks. There are communities all around the country that are in the world that are dealing with the same challenges we are. Some are doing a better job. Let's go find them and let's copy them. We established a mayor's office to reduce gun violence because we had community advocates here in town saying, hey, look at New York City, look at some other communities where they've done this. It works, it helps. So we did that. We established that about a year ago, and then we put that team to work to research and again look at evidence-based studies, and what they came back with was that they did a deep dive into the current dynamics locally here in Syracuse that are driving the violence. Something that I think people often assume is that it's largely driven by drug dealing or turf. More often than not, it's personal conflict, and the fact that many kids that you're, I'm sure, interacting with every day, and you are probably painfully aware of, aren't equipped with the necessary skills and tools to manage conflict in ways that many of us do. And when you combine that with surrounding them with trauma every day and seeing other people that don't know how to resolve conflict peacefully and seeing violence, it is not a surprise that they're in that situation. So at the root of it, it's personal conflicts. So how do we fix that? We look at cognitive behavioral therapy, which is something we've never done with this population. We look at conflict resolution. We look at how we can connect these individuals to job opportunities, to educational opportunities, but we have to give them a reason to go in a different direction, and that's where the stipend comes in. It is such a minuscule part of the project, but to be crystal clear, if you break the law in the city of Syracuse and we catch you, you're going to be arrested and you're going to be held accountable. But for these individuals, and what we're proposing is to take the 50 among the most high-risk individuals within, from 18 to 24. We're going to engage them. We are going to present the service opportunities to them. We're going to say, if you trust us and go down this path and stay on this path, we're going to provide you with some financial incentive, some financial consideration to try to keep you on that path, because we understand that your time, like everyone's time, is valuable and could be spent in other ways that may be more financially beneficial to you. We do the same thing with our Pathways to Apprenticeship program where we're putting people through programs a program to learn construction trade skills that then allows them to enter right into an apprenticeship of their choice. We do it with young people that are too young to work in our summer youth employment program, but still get some financial consideration. It's really no different. That headline did a huge disservice to this community, to the people that we serve, both the law-abiding ones and the non-law-abiding ones. But at the root of it, we got to do something. So we found something that worked, and we're going to try it here.
I did read the article. I thought it was a very well written article. I thought you articulated the point very well.
It's nature of our work, I suppose.
We only have time for one more question.
Sorry,
so
yeah.
I just have a comment. My name is Jackie Downing, and I work for TOPS.
Hi, Jackie.
And I worked for many years for PNC.
Me too.
You know where I'm going?
Did we work together?
We did.
You look familiar to me. I do remember.
You and your brother worked with me at Fairmount.
That's right.
And your dad picked my son to be his page in Washington for the summer.
How cool is that?
Yeah, so he really enjoyed it. He really
4065 red bell or green bell pepper. 4011 bananas, I think. 4085 red bell pepper. If I could only just get that out and cram something else in there. Really nice to see you. Tell me your name again.
my name is Jackie Downey.
I remember you, Jackie.
David, he worked for your dad.
Jackie, did you work at the customer service desk, or where did you work? I remember that. Yeah, awesome. Good to see you.
Oh, well, let's give a huge round of applause for Linda Wall.
Floor is yours, folks.
All right, and with that, we are going to start our regularly scheduled panel. So now you're on the, spotlight's on you. And it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Marty Masterpole. Marty is the Onondaga County Comptroller, and he was elected in 2019. He had been the Syracuse City Auditor since the election of 2011 and re-elected in 2015. And before that, he served 2 terms as a Syracuse Common Councilor and 2 terms as an Onondaga County Legislature. It's my pleasure to welcome Marty Masterpole.
I think you just said everything that I was going to say, so I don't know that I have much more to add to that. Thank you, everyone. This is probably my, I don't know, I think I started doing these when I was on the legislature, and I did 8 years as auditor, and now this has got to be 13th or 14th Citizens Academy. And the first time we've done it twice in a year, so this is becoming a full-time job. Just thank you, everyone, for engaging, and it's really important to do what you're doing, to engage, in all aspects of government. Finances are obviously very important. You'll hear from my colleague Steve Morgan as well, who, by the way, Steve and I are both same high school, Bishop Ludden alum. You won't believe it. He is older than I am. I know. I just look it. But we work closely. We're both on the 14th floor at the Civic Center, me in the Comptroller's office and him in financial operations, management and budget. It handles the whole wing over there, I'll say. But, I don't want to take up too much time with introductory stuff. I think we can get into the nuts and bolts of budgeting and questioning and that kind of stuff, but I'll reserve that for during the questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Marty. Next up, we have Steve Morgan, the Onondaga County Chief Fiscal Officer. As CFO, Morgan oversees the Onondaga County's budget, and prior to that, he served as Executive Deputy Commissioner of Social Services for 9 years and as an accounting supervisor for Social Services for 4 years. It is my pleasure to welcome Steve Morgan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. As Jessica outlined, actually this is my 29th year in county government, so June will mark 29 years. I actually started as an auditor in the Comptroller's office, not when Marty was the Comptroller, but
I would have kept him. He could have stayed.
Spent some time there, then went to social services and ran the accounting office, and then I've been in the CFO position now for this year will be 11 years, 2012. I'm losing track of years. So, I've spent my entire professional career working for the county of Onondaga. So I've been exposed to all aspects of the county as an auditor, auditing different departments, understanding how they operate, involved with management audits and making recommendations, and then spent a lot of time in the Department of Social Services as an accounting supervisor, and then as the deputy commissioner in charge of all the fiscal policy and fiscal analysis that comes with that job. And then, the previous county executive, Joni Mahoney, tapped me to be the CFO in 2012, and that's the job I've been doing since. So my main responsibility is constructing, bringing through the legislative process and monitoring the county's $1.4 billion budget. It's obviously a pretty daunting task. Mark Olson, who's the mayor, but also a county legislator, can speak to the breadth and the depth of the services that the county provides in this community. And it's quite a challenge, but something that we've really have come to streamline and make it as efficient as possible, and take most of the non-value added out of the process. The other big area that I oversee is, Marty mentioned, financial operations. So I think we're 7 or 8 years out now where each department within the county used to have their own finance office, some larger than others depending on the department and what they did. And when I became CFO, I brought an idea to the table to consolidate and centralize all the finance staff, resources, and offices into a division under the CFO for various reasons, namely consistency, efficiency. We re-engineered the work, went to a functional type approach, and really have saved significant resources in that back office operation. I'm excited for Q&A. Obviously, a lot of what the county is focused on now, on top of the plethora of things we do, is the arrival of Micron. OSIDA owns the site out in Clay. Obviously, that's the county's IDA. And we're obviously full tilt into assisting communities with planning. Obviously trying to get the sale of the land finalized, and starting to turn our sights towards the infrastructure that's going to be required at that site and surrounding areas to onboard a project of that size. So that's certainly going to be a huge part of what the county is involved with as we go forward here into the next decade and more. So thanks for having me here.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to switch over to the city side of things, and I am excited to announce or welcome Tim Rudd, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget for the City of Syracuse. He started this role in September of 2020, a very fun time to start any new role. And before that, he was also an analyst for the New York City Budget Office under Mayor Michael Bloomberg, and worked for MRDC, a nonprofit that analyzes fiscal impacts of government policy. He has been, and as you know, he was also an elected member of the Common Council before this. So we are very excited to hear a lot of his experience and wisdom. Tim Rudd.
Thank you. Might be hard to believe, but I took this class in 2014. So I sat that side. And then when I was finance chair, I think I got invited to be on the panel. I pretty much think I've been here since, but I don't know if I'm going to be invited back after this. But the council, the mayor knows this, and the council president knows this, and probably the clerk knows this, but I'm pretty much unapologetic, so it is what it is. But yeah, I was, like, the mayor I'm from Syracuse, so I went to city schools and grew up in Syracuse, and then I went to Syracuse University, and then I went to the Maxwell School, and I lived in New York for a while, and I did budget stuff there, and then I worked at this nonprofit that did cost benefit analysis of programs that are supposed to improve the lives of low-income people. So earlier the mayor mentioned cognitive behavioral therapy, so I actually really worked on financial structuring of the first social impact bond in the country, which was at Rikers Island, which Goldman Sachs put $10 million into a program for cognitive behavioral therapy for 16 to 18-year-olds to basically help them make better decisions and come back to jail less, with the idea that it would then reduce the Department of Correction overtime and it would repay the bond. And the program didn't work because it turns out that jail is not a very good environment for therapy, because you need to feel safe, and there's a lot of movement within jails due to violence and a whole bunch of things. So it didn't work, but it was a really interesting concept, and it's kind of cool to see the idea playing out now in the paying gangbanger program. I'm just kidding, but yeah, the mayor's office to reduce gun violence. So and then I sort of quit that job to run for city council. I didn't tell anybody I quit my job at the time to run for city council, but I guess burn your boat if you want to take the island, so to speak. But I got elected. I really just tried to do my best, but in some ways I got, I guess, kind of framed as the mayor's nemesis. And then the budget director retired. And I was like, oh my God, I had one, and I had another one coming. And I don't know if you know what the city, but I had left a really good job, and to be a counselor, and then I gave myself a really audacious pay raise as a counselor because we went from like 21,000 to 30,000 at that time. But the budget director position seemed like more of a sustain my family kind of career path. So the mayor and I hugged and continued on, and here we are today.
Thank you, Jim.
Emotional roller coaster.
I was about to say, I want to see the podcast next, or the biography. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Next up, it is my pleasure to welcome President Helen Hudson. Helen is the president of the Common Council for the City of Syracuse, and as president, she presides over the Common Council, which negotiates the city budget and as well as the Common Council Committee's draft and review of all legislation before it goes to the full council for a vote. She is the chair of the Charter, Rules, Procedures, and RFP Committee, and is a member of the Airport Public Transportation Committee, the Finance, Taxation, and Assessment Committee, and the Neighborhood Preservation, Housing, and Homeless and Housing Vulnerable Committee. It is my pleasure to welcome President Hudson. I'm technically the hostess. This is her chamber, so.
What they say, my house. This is my house. Thank you, Citizens Academy, for being here, and thank you for asking me to be a part of this. Yes, I'm Helen Hudson. I am president of Syracuse City Council. And go back a little bit. I was just an ordinary citizen because I feel like as citizens, we have opportunities and we don't take them. So I really ran for office because I wanted people that came from the same communities that I came from to understand that you can do and be anything you want to be. You don't have to be the smartest scholar in school to make a difference. So I started out as a community activist. I actually organized Mothers Against Gun Violence. So that was a program where we work with mothers that have lost their children to kind of keep comfort and hold on to them. And right now, I'm still holding on to some of these women. And some of their kids were murdered 10 years ago. So it's not a process that you say just get over it. You have to continue to let's just keep holding on. And my biggest thing was seeing the city of Syracuse, because there is so much opportunity here, and we just have to get everybody else to see what we see. So I started out on the council as at large. I did 6 years at large, and then the skies opened up. My predecessor, my mentor, Van Robinson, decided he was leaving. So it was like, okay, do you do your last 2 years at large, let somebody else run for president? Now you're kicked out, because if you're sitting in the seat, you'll get the seat. So I decided I was going to sit in the seat. So I ran for president. I'm in my last term. In 2 years, I will be retired. Yay. So I'm looking forward to that. But while I'm sitting here, it gives me an opportunity because we have new counselors that have come in. So government and learning policy, it's not an easy thing because you really need to, we're charged with overseeing the city budget, we're charged with making sure that the legislation is in place and we're writing laws, so everything we do, it is being done to affect you because you're our priority. So what I've done since I've been here, we've done a lot. But Pathways to Apprenticeship that the mayor talked about, that's a program that is very vital to this community because we have to give people opportunities. If you don't have opportunities, we're going to keep seeing what we see. So this program is phenomenal because they're actually working with the trades, which is unheard of. So the trades are training folks from within this community to be able to have that pipeline, to go in to be a plumber or go in to be an electrician or whatever it may be that pays money, pays good money. And now I'm working on another program to where I'm going to be working with the school district because I need my babies to understand construction is great, but construction is seasonal. So we need to have another avenue for folks. So what I'm looking at is most children in the inner city of Syracuse, they don't look at, oh, let me go to school to be an architect, or oh, let me go and be an engineer. And every time I sit on the RFP committee, I sit on all RFPs. And be perfectly frank, I'm just being frank, like Tim said, unapologetically. When you do a RFP and then you put out these requests for proposals and they all come back and then you're told, we can't find any minorities, that's a problem. That's a real problem for me. So can't find them, we'll make them, we'll build them. Yeah. So that's my goal, is to build this community and build the workforce that we need, so no one will ever say to me again, we can't find them. That's a problem. That's what I'm working on.
Excellent. Thank you so much, President Hudson. And finally, last but not least, and this is interesting because we're going from, county to city to city to now how our towns and villages manage their budget. I'm excited to welcome Mayor Olson of the Village of Fayetteville, or do you just prefer Mark?
That's fine, yeah.
Mayor Olson was elected Village of Fayetteville as a village trustee in 1996 and then to the mayor's office in April of 2004. He is the current president of the Onondaga County Mayors Association, a consensus member, and the New York Conference of Mayors Committee member, and was also just recently elected the county legislature for the 10th district. It is my pleasure to welcome Mayor Mark Olson.
Thank you. Thank you all, and thank you for taking time to learn about our villages and towns and cities and counties, and I think it's important that you're involved. To my panelists, thank you very much. It's great catching up with a lot of you. Tim, I have to laugh. I was in a meeting. I was mayor for like a week, and my son was in 3rd grade, brought 6 of his friends into my office, and just charged in, and I'm with Senator Valesky, Assemblyman Sturpey, and I put my head down, and next thing I know, he's on Assemblyman Sturpey's lap, talking to him, and having a great time. So I feel for you. Mayor Walsh did a great job. Villages are small cities. There's 15 villages in Onondaga County. We do the exact same thing that a city does. It's just a smaller scale. Helen and I were talking earlier. We're going to the same garbage cans that the city is going to. We're going to buy about 3,000. They're going to buy about 30,000, I think. So it's just a smaller scale, but we do a lot of things in a similar way. But the villages, act in the same way that the city does, just different day-to-day operations. Municipal cooperation is very important. A lot of what we do, we can't do without help from county, city, and the state government. So I'm excited to talk to you about a lot of things that are happening in our village and the villages in Onondaga County. And I want to correct Mayor Walsh. Fayetteville, Manlius, Manoa are not part of the 81 lawsuit. We did not. Not join that, but I will tell you that sir, you asked a question. One concern we have is what if they get it wrong? We just want to make sure that if there's a mistake made during the process, they fix it. That's all we're concerned about. But we have a great Betsy Parmley lives in my village, so yeah. That's true. That's true. So, but I'm excited to talk to you about budgeting and things that happen in villages. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's give a round of applause for our panelists. We're going to take a quick 3-minute break to, use the bathroom, stretch your legs, and then we'll go into the Q&A. So, thank you.
Yeah, stretch my legs.
I know.
COO? She's in auxiliary services. She's in the front.
Thank you.
That oversees all of it.
Now, what's really cool about tonight's session is it is technically being picked up by these mics and live streamed.
What?
I guess, yeah. I believe it's being, well, you said live streamed?
It is.
Yeah. I think just to the website.
Oh, so nobody's watching that. That's all.
No, somebody's watching it.
Somebody's watching it.
Another headline, no one's watching that, right?
Somebody's watching it.
Yeah, I found that out after. I was like, oh, we can turn on the big mics. So,
Fun.
fair warning. I know now. Don't worry. Blur out the faces. But
You're
if you want your
unapologetic.
question, heard, then we'll give you this mic so that it can be picked up. Otherwise, you can't be heard. So that's why we'll have this. But otherwise, we will begin the Q&A portion of our session. So, what do you want to know about budget and finance? Yes, Zach. Would you guys rather walk up?
Yeah, it's so fancy. Do it.
I'll give you a choice.
She said so fancy.
Listen, this is great for the social media, trust me. These are prime photos.
I have the budget open here for Syracuse City. So my name is Zach Young. I work for BII. We're an impact investor. In my job, I get to work with a lot of organizations, for-profit and nonprofit, on their budgets. And a budget is a reflection of your values, right? It's what you're spending money on, what you care about. My question's pretty simple. Who gets to shape how much is spent on each line item in the budget? I know, certainly Tim's role and similar roles for different layers of government, I assume, hold some responsibility for keeping it to a certain threshold, et cetera, formalizing it, but I'd imagine a lot of different people touch it. Looking at the budget, seeing our biggest spending items being education, then employee benefits, then police, then fire, then public works, on and on and on, I think all of us might have different value set, right? We might want to spend more or less on different categories. What avenues, who touches it currently, and what avenues are there for citizens to shape what goes into the budget? I know participatory budgeting is a concept we like to evangelize that some other places are doing, and a cool way to get citizen voice into budgeting. Anyway.
I'm going to let Tim take it because he's the budget director, but I want to talk about when you said education. See, with the state of New York, there are certain things. With the education piece of it, they pass that through. The city council takes in the budget for the school district just to pass it on. We're a pass-through. So we don't have anything to do with that budget. We just give it to them. That's by the state law. So the rest of the budget line, that's Tim budget.
You know what, I'll jump in only because having been in all three locations, common council, then county kind of administration, not really, but as well as legislature. Kind of depends where you are and what the form of government is. In the city of Syracuse, I'd put it on the mayor more than I'd put it on the common council. Mm-hmm. And when you're in the county when you're at the county, I'd put it on the legislature more than, certainly the administrators, the mayor and the executives, the mayor and the county executive are proposing their budget and needs to be passed or modified by the legislative branch. But from that point forward, if you're in this building at City Hall, it goes to the mayor and his department heads, and the council really has almost little to do with it after that point. At the legislature, at the county, I'd say it's just the opposite. The legislature has a lot more to do with it, and Steve can speak to that too. But it's not a great answer, but it depends where you are.
And I can tell you at the village, I'm in it right now. So village law says the mayor has to present a budget to the trustees. So that was presented in the beginning of March. Once I put that together, and it is a little bit like you said, it's a list of priorities that we put together, but that it covers fire, EMS, DPW, codes, clerk, court, senior center, recreation, library, tree commission, parks commission, all those things. So that's $7.3 million. We work with our department heads, with our employees, look at it, put it together. Does it make sense? Will it work? Can we afford to do what we want to do? And then the mayor presents it to the trustees. Then they are in charge of adding, deleting what they think that the residents want to see, and then it gets adopted, but it has to be adopted by law by the end of April. And our fiscal year starts June 1, but the budget has to be adopted by the end of May 1st. So there is some citizen input. We have public hearings, we have public meetings, everything's live streamed, but people need to get involved. People need to, Helen and I were talking earlier, people need to understand how the process works, but also what's involved in the process, because our goals and our vision most of the time does line up, but sometimes it may not line up. And what do you want to do? The only way we're going to know is email, phone call, or coming to a budget hearing. On the county side, we're very fortunate that Steve and his whole crew does an amazing job, because it is a very high level, $1.4 billion versus the village of Fayetteville's is $7.3 million. I mean, you're talking apples and oranges. You know what I mean? So when you hear some of these numbers, and I asked Steve, I picked the phone and said, Steve, what about this? How does this work? All those questions got answered. So I have a very good comfort level that people that's a profession are doing that. But some of this is mandated too. I mean, a fire truck has to show up. An ambulance has to show up. I was just talking to one of your classmates that I went to high school with. I'm in charge to make sure that those trucks get out. And if something doesn't happen, they don't always call Helen. They call the mayor. You know what I mean? And so the phone rings every day of the week, or counselors.
Yeah,
but in most small communities, the mayor gets the phone call. So we have responsibilities. We have to make sure we have to clear snow. We have to have fire trucks. We have to pick up garbage. We have to during the pandemic. We made a phone call to the governor's office and said, can we just combine garbage and recycling till we get labor situated? No, you have to pick them up separately, and they have to be picked up. We scrambled and we made it happen. I know the city scrambled and they made it happen. There's certain things that just have to happen, so you have to have that money in that budget to make sure those priorities are taken care of. Life and safety.
So, Mark touched on it a little bit, and the county's process is actually, from a process standpoint, is pretty similar to the village, where we obviously work internally as an administration and with our departments to develop an executive budget that gets presented to the county legislature. They review it. The Ways and Means Committee is the main body that reviews that budget. They make recommendations, and then they go to the full legislature for a vote. Any increases in spending, any increases in revenue, the county executive has the ability to veto that, actually. And then it can go back to the legislature, and it can be overridden with a 2/3 vote. So that's basically the process. From a policy perspective, Mark mentioned mandates. The county is the sole provider of human services in this county. So we are responsible for administering and paying for all the human services, social programs that assist people that are in need, whether it's medical care, it's food, it's housing. That's one of the main things that distinguishes the county from the other municipalities in this county, is we're responsible for all of that. So when you look at our budget for this year, about $500,000 in local dollars, and when we talk local dollars, we're talking about the property tax levy and the county share of sales tax, is bordering on $500 million for 2023. 66% of that is the mandates we're required to operate and pay for, and public safety. So those two things right out of the gate eat up 2/3 of the county's budget. Then everything else has to be paid for. Maintaining the world-class park system we have in the county, ensuring that the roads are plowed, ensuring that the roads are maintained in the off-season. All of those other things have to come out of the rest of those local dollars. So from a policy perspective, again, we're driven, a lot by the mandates. When there's discretion, County Executive McMahon, when he came into office, came in with his PI platform, and any additional investments, if we have the resources, have to be in line with that platform. So it's the driving force up here that we use then to make decisions at a lower level. PI stands for Poverty, Infrastructure, and Economic Development. So.
Oh, hang on, I gotta go. I'm the budget director.
You're the budget director.
Well, I feel like if it works, if the process works, then nobody does, and everybody does, all at the same time. Because we are a democracy where you elect the legislature and they have to approve the things, and they're getting yelled at the grocery store. So like, at the end of the day, hey.
Church is my favorite.
The one was so much better when he was, like, the one got trained, he came here and sat here and was really quiet. The other one hasn't had the training. But we do a lot of, like, so I do feel like I actually have a fair amount of influence as budget director, because I get to kind of set it. I get to meet with all the department heads in private without a camera. They sort of tell me the truth. I think they're like a little less afraid of me than, I feel like they might tell me the truth more than they might tell like the mayor, honestly, because he sort of wants something usually. And so I know a little bit more, and then having come from the council, I like value the council, so they kind of like, I understand what they can do. And as a counselor, I felt very empowered to exert my opinion, like, but you have to work with 5 other counselors. One counselor has no control. One counselor working with 5 other counselors has a whole lot of control. But you got to get people to work together, and that's a lot of work, and a lot of people don't do that. And it's similar, like the mayor, he has his vision, and that's real, and that's part of the reason why I'm happy to work for him, because I agree with his vision that Syracuse is going to be like an inclusive, diverse, growing place. Hey, please. But so I do think he refers to that a lot, and that influences it, but at the end of the day, there are real constraints, right, because it is public safety. And part of the reason I have this happening right now is because during the pandemic, my wife became a paramedic, and then she became a manliest firefighter paramedic, so she's literally in the fire academy right now in Montour Falls, so I'm quasi a single dad from Sunday evening to Thursday evening. So they do have childcare during the day. I'm not a total crazy person, but they're pretty crazy. Yeah. Steve raises his eyebrows. I don't know. And but so a lot of it goes to police and fire. Like we have contracts that we just agreed to 5-year labor agreements, and like 2/3 of what we do is police and fire. And that's not what people think of when they're complaining about the potholes and the parks and the trash and a whole bunch of other things. So, and then it just becomes how many can you have, and people usually want more. So like right now there's constraints because we have like a really large structural deficit that was sort of closed with federal stimulus money, and it's going away. So we have a large gap because we grew our government bigger, and now we have to figure out how to fill it, and that's a real challenge. And I don't think the mayor always feels in control of it as probably the most in control of it person, because there's a lot of things that are beyond your control. Sales tax is our biggest revenue, beyond our control. It's gone up, but it's beyond our control. State aim aid has stayed the same for a long time. That's our second biggest one. It's stayed the same for a very long time. The next thing we have is property tax, which people are pretty hesitant to raise most of the time, that I think we may try to raise in the coming weeks, but that's never popular, and you pay a price for that. From there, it's all like grabbing money at smaller levels, right? So it's writing parking tickets and having parking garages and a whole bunch of things like that. Okay, come here, Josiah.
And while he's
Anyways,
talking to the kids real quick, I just want to say this, right? When you talk about the tax in the city of Syracuse, we have to understand, we have a whole bunch of not-for-profit in our city. And on every block, you probably got $20 million worth of taxable properties that's not taxed. And you have 64% of you guys paying property taxes. So it's a little tough to try to figure that out when you don't have a tax base.
Why can't we tax those people?
Tax exempt. It's against the law.
Is that a law?
Yeah.
It's a political nightmare?
No, it's a law. It's a law. It's a law. It's law. And SU has been, they've actually accommodated us with some service fees, but I mean, everybody doesn't do that. And the not-for-profits, along with the schools, they pay fees, but it's not taxes. So.
The property tax thing is really, or the exemption, because it is more than 50% of the city's value is exempt. So that's part of the reason why we need a fair sales tax sharing agreement, because right now we have a pretty fair agreement, which really gives like a quarter of the
Pretty much, quarter of the 4%.
sales tax to the city, which is, I think, sort of based on us having a quarter of the population. But I think you could almost make an argument that it should be even more than that, given that 85% of the land in the not city of Onondaga County is taxable, and 45% of the city
It's
land
definitely
is
an
taxable.
improvement.
But it's a dramatic improvement, so
Yeah.
nobody's complaining,
Yeah.
you know? Let it ride. I didn't mention, but I don't have enough going on, so I feel like Mark maybe like planted this seed a year ago when he was like, I'm the mayor of East Syracuse, and I'm your new county legislator. And I was like, you could do that? And then I started cracking jokes about it, and then all of a sudden I am the Democratic candidate for the 15th legislative district on the Onondaga County Legislature, and I plan to keep being budget director. So you can call me a double dipper or whatever you want, but I feel like there's like a pure synergy because I actually understand how it works, and I know where the points are for real collaboration, and kind of have seen how having functional relationships between the city and county works. So I actually plan to not be a poo thrower when I go there, and I actually plan to be like a progress person to get things done regardless of all the other stuff. But I think that's where you kind of do have to know how it works in order to actually advocate for like your city, because we do have a lot of kind of part-time people in government, and it does actually, like I did actually go to graduate school for state and local finance. It's like a thing. So like it does pay to have like some level of training and stuff in it, but a lot of people don't.
And I'm one of those part-time people.
Yes, Vanessa?
I'm Vanessa. I live on the,
I always forget this.
no, where did I live? North side. I don't know if it's north or east. I'm new. I'm trying to figure it out.
welcome.
First question I have is, can you give me a understanding of the county and the city, and why? I'm not trying for people not to have jobs. I just don't understand why we need so many different pieces of the government. And then the second piece is, with all of this wonderful assistance and smarts and all of those things, why is the city of Syracuse in such a way, in such straits? With all of the things that, this is our 9th week, and I asked this at week 6, because by week 6, I had never seen as many services that are presented, and many people with jobs. So what happened? And how are we going to make that better before Micron gets here? Because they're coming, and I'm trying to figure out, how do you find out how you can get involved, like to be a part of the solution, but I can't quite get what the heck happened. Does that make sense? I don't know who answers that. I just know something is not working. And how do we get it right before this huge company shows up with hundreds of other people, thousands of other people? What are we going to do? It's like 19, 20 months from now. So I'm trying to understand this, so when I do talk to people, I won't sound like I'm still from New York City. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm trying to get some clarity. I mean, thank God for Citizens Academy, because I've learned a lot. But I'm now the budget, the money, where it really matters. I want to know that, if somebody can answer me.
I'll take a shot at the first one and then probably provide my opinion on the second one. There's 5 of us here. Right? There's 5 of us here, and on the first consolidation, which we discuss why are there so many representatives of government, town, village, county, you name it, fire districts, sanitary districts. It's almost. I agree with you. There's too many. It's political will. There's not the political will to do it. There was a attempt 2017, 2018, a group called Consensus put together a plan. My opinion in that plan was it was flawed. It left out or gave towns and villages the opportunity to buy in, and it left out school districts. And school districts are the largest piece of this whole puzzle. So that fell apart literally, but I think we do have, our government's too big, and It's where my office was upstairs, the city auditor. When I was there, I think every year at Citizens Academy, I spoke as to how it should consolidate into my current job. I still think that's a good idea. Now, of course, but I think it's in that direction. We do have a larger office, larger staff, and it makes sense. And you could have a city division of the county comptroller's office. These things can happen, and I don't know. I agree with you that something has to give because the finances just aren't going to work. We're going to tax people to death. We're running out of services, all of the above. The second part, I'm going to disagree with a little bit of your statement on the same aspect of agreeing. We have Micron coming here, and they chose us. We're doing something right because they didn't choose other cities. They chose us, and they chose this county. They chose that location to spend $100 billion or some ungodly amount of money and 4,000 jobs. They could up to
9,000 jobs.
9,000 jobs. Thank you. So, while I think that we are in a way that we could get better, I think we're in a way that we're doing something right because they chose us and they looked all over the place and decided Central New York was where they wanted to go. I think we should pat ourselves on the back and not say we got to fix it before they get here. I think something's going well.
Well,
just my opinion.
The reason why, first of all, is this with the site, the attributes of the site. So that was the first and foremost, is what they were deciding on is access to a large amounts of clean water, power, and the ability to clean that water. So that was the attractiveness from that perspective. Micron is fully invested in this project in this community. There's a 200 million, I believe, or even larger community benefit program that they're already starting. Mm-hmm. So they realize that the community needs to change in certain ways in order to be able to handle this project. From a workforce development perspective, I mean, they're already starting CHIPS camps for kids when they're little. I mean, this is a long-term project. They're not going to be producing a chip here until the later part of this decade. Mm-hmm. So we got time here. And they know that investments need to be made in certain core areas in order to make this work. So, of course, we're not perfect, right? But I think the players that are involved with this know what needs to be done, and I think Micron obviously knows, and they're starting to make the appropriate investments to help this project be successful. From a government overlap perspective, it's something that's been discussed since I started in the county 30 years ago, and. Marty mentioned, Marty hit the nail on the head. It's all about turf. People don't want to give up their turf, and that's really what it comes down to. And, what's interesting, too, is survey after survey that I've seen, especially at the lower levels of government, and Mark can probably speak to this, they survey people in those villages. They want their village government. They want to pay for that. They do.
77%. I was on consensus, so Martin.
Yeah. Mark can speak to it better than me.
77% of people wanted their town and their village. They wanted it. They think it's a better form of government. Listen, Helen and I were talking. What's the worst place you've ever been? I was at church. When are you picking up my leaves? Helen was telling me it was a funeral. We're the closest people to the government, and you can't go anywhere without. People look at me when I'm at Huller's or at Bull and Bear or something. They're like, what the hell is he doing drinking out? I'm like, I'm the same person that everybody, we all have jobs to do, but we also are people. We have kids and we have families, and we mow our lawns and we take care of our houses. But village government, the reason we did opt-in was because we know there is some villages that are really close to going, they shouldn't be in business or are going close. So it gave them the option to have an avenue to go. Same with towns. But the schools, the reason we didn't touch the schools was because Dr. Desiata, who I think everybody from the ESM school district and used to be in the city school district, said, there's too many rules, there's too many regulations, there's too much in the state. Let's do something good with government first, then we'll get to schools.
Let's practice on you guys first, and then if it works, we'll do it.
Yeah. So they wanted to, that's why we kind of looked at that and said, let's.
And one comment I like to make, too, is, I don't think it gets enough notoriety, and that is the work that our governments do collaborate on together. I don't think it gets enough publicity, to be honest with you. So there are a lot of things that our governments work together on. I mean, the city and the county do a ton of things, and a lot of it's back office stuff, but it's valuable, and it creates efficiencies and ultimately savings, I believe, from doing the purchasing for the city and the school districts, or the city school district, from sharing the same platform for the application we use for financial accounting and budgeting. So there are a lot of things that have happened over the years. Can it be more? Yes, it should be more, but that's where we are.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on you said Micron is coming. In city, county, villages, and towns, we're working on that. The city of Syracuse has invested over $20 million to do infill because we know we have a housing crisis. So we're building new. If you go around the city, you'll see new single-family homes. And we're also working, my second job, I do, we better have another job. I work for the United Way. So when you talk about Micron, I'm working really closely with Micron right now because they understand that we have a workforce in the city and it just takes a little bit of push. Maybe they need that GED because maybe they need the literacy skills. So working with the school district and working with Micron and working with all of these pieces, there's a lot of pieces to this that you're not going to see, but you'll see the end result. So there are things being done on a city level, county level, towns and villages that we're working to build ourselves up. And not just Micron. Again, that highway is coming through here. So we have a lot of opportunities to get our folks to the table. Because 9 times out of 10, we're always left out. As this gentleman over here said, do the right thing. This time we're trying to do the right thing for this population of people that has just totally been disenfranchised for quite a while. So there's work going on.
And back to the original question a little bit, if you take that logic of why are there so many levels of government, like can't we just have like one, we would only have a federal government, and that would probably be really tyrannous if you really because I do think there remains this sentiment of government is most accountable when it's closest to the people, when you can yell at the person at the grocery store, right? And we can't all do that when it's higher level. Then there was the question, kind of, hey, of like, why is Syracuse the way it is? Or whatever, and there's a lot loaded. Sorry. You gotta sit for a second. There's a lot loaded in that question, and I think it has to be poverty, right? Yeah, take the carrots.
He doesn't want the truth out, the chat.
But like the poverty that we have is, bless you, concentrated in the city, and it's like racialized, right? So, and we're segregated along economic and lines. So we have, I am also the procurement director as part of being budget director, and with that I get to sit on all the RFPs with President Hudson. So my white guy, I get to know how truly white guy-ish all of our contractors are and all of our proposals are, and it is pretty shameful, but it is pretty reflective of the reality that exists within this county. The poverty is concentrated in the city, it is racialized, and it is, I don't know that Micron, I think this is part of the worry, right? Micron doesn't fix that. Right. So people will be excluded the way they've been traditionally excluded. The city, I do believe that the city needs to like, thank you. The city, like the way the city, like, and I lived in New York City for 7 years, so I got a little bit enough to come and see with eyes here. And I always thought, like in SU, there would be these kids from New York City, and they think they're all tough, and I'm like, you think you're tough? You don't even know. Like Syracuse, you got nothing on Syracuse, because like the poverty that exists in Syracuse is so much more terrifying because it's like this isolated lack of opportunity. Whereas like in New York, you're a subway ride away from the richest people in the world and all the jobs of the world. Here, you're 250 miles away from anything else, and you're living in this isolated, economic, racialized thing. So it's really hard to envision much different, and that's part of the issue. And I don't, fixing that part is a way bigger issue. So I think the city has to grow, right? Because part of it's the lack of opportunity. So if we got 50,000 more residents to live basically downtown, and I think that's where you have to like empower people to own a home now in Syracuse, because it's the only, otherwise you're gonna get priced out. If you're renting, you're gonna pay more and more of your money. If anybody who quasi-eligible to get a home should be getting a home now, and then we wouldn't be worried about displacement, and people are ready for displacement. They're primed for displacement. They expect to be displaced almost at this point, and we have so much space, but there's no reason to be displacing anybody. We should be figuring out how that's the only way we end the poverty, is for people to own some stuff, to get the equity from the ownership, and to ride the wave to the middle class. And that's how Syracuse can like grow, thrive, to be inclusive. All the other like fairy tales are not real. Like, people have to be connected to ownership and the opportunities, and right now we lack the connections across too many of the communities.
One thing you didn't mention is all the speculators throwing their hands together saying, "Ooh, baby, we're going to make lots of money." Just looking to buy up all that housing that people can barely afford now.
All right, Katie, here, I'll let you go up there.
Hi. Katie Sebo, school psychologist in the Syracuse City Schools, and I live in the Meadowbrook neighborhood. I do own my home, and I got in at the right time. But to your point, yeah, an investor just bought the home next to me and flipped it, and now paid it, is making money off of it. It doesn't. My question doesn't have anything to do with that. My question is specifically about for you, Mr. Morgan. We talked a little bit about the human services that are provided within the county, and I'm very curious about how decisions are made about how to fund human service jobs. With so many jobs coming in with Micron and technical jobs and these CTE training that are going to be, provided at the high school level or, at OCC in an inexpensive way. I went to a private undergrad for 4 years. I went to graduate school for 6 years, and I work in human services, and I make a fraction of what my husband makes for a private corporation with just a bachelor's degree. So I'm very curious about how the consideration of with the expansion that's going to occur in this area, with the competition of jobs and the financial incentive to go into the jobs that are technical in nature, are required for working in the Micron field, I guess I'll call it. What are the plans to train and retain and expand the human services that we have to offer so that there's people being paid what they're worth in terms of their knowledge base and the level of service that they provide to the community?
Well, that's a tall order because we're having a hard time hiring people now.
Yeah.
So we have hundreds of open jobs at the county,
yeah.
A lot of them in this area. So, from a compensation perspective, well, let's back up. So from some of the barriers I think that we encounter, not only now but previously, is the whole civil service
yes.
aspect of it.
Yep.
So you got to take a test, you got to pass a test, you got to be reachable on the list. So I think the state, in their crunch, because they're experiencing the same thing we are, but at a high, a much expanded level, they've started to realize that they need to start rethinking civil service. So the legislature actually just passed, or the Ways and Means Committee yesterday, the state is piloting a program that will allow us to hire people in traditionally competitive positions without taking a test. So all they have to do is they have to meet the qualifications for the job, but it will allow us to place people that are qualified in these jobs without an exam. They still have to serve a probationary period, and if they do that and they become permanent and never have to take a test to get into that job. So I think the state has started to realize that that's a huge barrier to employment in some areas. So we've identified in the state identified specific titles. A lot of them are in the human service field, and they're also in emergency communications, 911, areas where they're vital services, right? And we need to fill these jobs. So that's part of the equation, I believe. I don't know if it's going to be the panacea. I don't know. We'll see. But certainly compensation is the other aspect of it. And, you have bargaining units. They're union jobs. So obviously, their pay is tied to that agreement and that negotiation. I know, we're just started negotiation with the largest union, CSEA. Their contract ended at the end of last year. I believe, aside from just, cost of living wage increases, the conversations, I believe, are starting to center around, how do we raise the salary scale and schedule entirely to try and get it more competitive. So, I mean, that's where we have to go, and we have to balance that with, obviously, the resources we have to do that.
Is that a priority?
It's a priority in the sense that these are mandated services we have to provide, and we need to do that. And so if we don't, then, people don't get the services that they need. That they are entitled to. Children aren't safe.
Yes.
So obviously it's a priority from that perspective. We need to provide those services at a level that people expect, and that's what we're attempting to do. So we lost people through the pandemic. And now, for various reasons, people aren't coming back to the government sector. I believe they will when the economy finally is in a downturn, which is coming, and the private sector starts laying people off, unfortunately. I think you'll see people come back to the government sector. So yes, there's challenges there, and we're working through them. But certainly, I think the civil service issue as well as the compensation issue is where we're focusing our efforts.
And then I want to piggyback on Mr. Morgan because, again, I'm going to put on my United Way hat. And working for a not-for-profit, we've been working closely with the county, and we're working with the different providers around the county, around the city of Syracuse, for not-for-profit providers because they're in the same boat. We're looking at child care. We're having a really tough time with that. So we've been working with the county and the different providers to figure it out. And it's the money. Because the child care providers basically, and the people that's caring for our most precious cargo, they qualify for social services. It shouldn't be that way. So we're working to try to figure this out, because I think they said they had something like, it was a couple hundred slots they can't fill. And it's because of
Yeah, it's the same thing in the elder care world too. We don't the people that do the hands-on work get paid a fraction.
So pockets.
I know the governor has proposed quite a bit of money for the child care arena, with the hopes of building that infrastructure and paying providers a wage that will allow them to attract caregivers to come in and care for the children, which is going to be critical, again, if our population expands is what's expected. So,
yeah.
You mentioned with Micron too that I just want to training or training locals to be able to do that work and be paid appropriately, et cetera. And Micron has invested, as Steve mentioned, with the community benefits agreement. Is that what they're calling it? We just this week, between my office and Steve's, set up the projects for OCC. They're going to be doing one of the largest clean rooms. I think it's the largest clean room classroom at OCC. And having a 17-year-old and looking at colleges at the moment, that is by far the best bang for your buck is here in Onondaga County. So if you can convince your 17-year-old to go to OCC and train in a clean room and go in the Micron environment, I think there'll be a lot of success there. Dollar for dollar from, as you mentioned, 6 years in grad school and all what you spelled out is a real thing. I would like to believe in Onondaga County with this project, with these programs and things, I think we have the ability to spend a little on education and get a lot of benefit to make salary on the backside, but that's also stay tuned. We're at the very beginning of that at the moment.
But it's and those are all great points, but it's a balancing act too with our fringe benefit cost. And Steve knows this because, I mean, health insurance for retirees and so we don't want to tax, like, I think our firefighters, their benefit package is 65% of their salary. So when they retire, it goes down to like 45%, but it's still a lot of money. So you have to be careful that everybody doesn't want to pay more taxes, but we've got to make sure that's a balancing act. I agree with this. The help, it's called the HELP program. I think the state actually did something right, and I think this is going to be a great program, but we've got to balance that with this downturn coming on, and what do we do, and how do we make sure that we don't raise taxes because our fringe benefit costs, pensions, and insurance, and all these other things. We have to be, you know what I mean, because it's real. I want to pay them as much as they're worth and more, but there's only so much money that we can tax you without getting in trouble.
And, you know, a little PR for working in government, both in any of and you're living it at the moment. I hope you realize it. To say the government pension benefit when you retire is you can't save that much money. I mean, you got to make that's a bad statement. Of course, you could save that much money if you're making a lot more money, but in my world, I'd almost have to be making probably double in the private sector or more to save. Well, that's assuming that I live after my retire. You know, you want to live 10, 15, 20 years, but, you know, people are looking even,
and that's great for retirement age. I'm just worried that with this next generation of folks that are coming into the workforce, that there's no incentive to wait that long.
I understand it. It's a now world because inflation is where it's at. I mean, the cost of housing is where it is, and you have to pay back your student debt. I agree with you, and I understand but it's, as I said, it's just my little PR for, because we all have vacant positions. Some are more technical. Those job specs that you talked about, I am happy too about the civil service, but even reading some of the job specs that you need to qualify for, it's hard to qualify for some of these jobs on paper. So
even just trying to refer people to the websites, because we've heard this a couple of times, and just telling them, you know, walking through it. I work at SU. Walking through that, you know how many times I've been looking to say, well, maybe I need to get out of a school and a private school and go into the government. The qualification, you need an education just for the qualifications. And I seriously am like, who's gonna get these jobs? I mean, you know, like,
it's hard.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't even know how the job description pool is done. I don't know who puts the
Civil service.
Civil service.
Civil service.
And to try to get that fixed at the state is.
So that's through the state.
Yeah,
that is.
It's what did they say yesterday? They haven't even been able to get tests for some positions in the last.
They're starting to pop.
Some of the tests were not available.
Yeah. So this program is meant to try and alleviate that problem, as well as the fact that, you know, there's hundreds of positions that are needed to be filled. So the goal is to pretty much say, if you qualify for the position, you don't have to take a test. So that's a huge barrier for some people, obviously. So the hope is that's going to help with onboarding people, but I don't think it's going to be the end-all, be-all. I think the other aspect of it is, and she mentioned, is what we pay. I mean, a caseworker coming into the county starts in the low 50s. You know, and they've spent how much on their education, you know, to become qualified to take that job. So, you know, the concept with government, I don't think holds true anymore, where, you know, the jobs typically were lower paying, but the benefits out, you know, subsidize the lower pay, right? And I think we're starting to see that that's not the case anymore. And, you know, we're not going to be able to attract people if we don't take a hard look at what, especially the lower level entry positions is really where we're falling down. So you know, we've started to try and do some things with, when we've had increased contributions to healthcare, we've tried to tier it and say, okay, you know, the lower grades of the pay scale, we're not going to touch their contributions. We're not going to require them to pay more. They're going to pay less than the top tier of that pay scale. So we're doing some of those things, but you know, the big fix is raising the whole salary schedule, and I think that's going to be a heavy lift.
But the lower ones that we can't fill are the experience in some case that you need to get the higher paid positions for those qualifications.
You don't even say that, because when you talk about the police department, we have how many positions in there, but they're not filled. We have 324 police officers, but we budget for 4 something. So you can't fill those positions.
Question. Sorry, Casey. All right, who's next?
Thank you.
Tyler? Oh, we're gonna go up there. Bye, the big mic. I got you. Pass it back.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tyler, and you have to excuse me. I'm losing my voice. I would agree with the answers that were given prior to the pandemic taking place. I used to think that it was normal to work 2 jobs, and that's just what it has to be. But when the pandemic happened and we were in a state of emergency, I saw the rapid response from top down, and you were able to get a very high paying job helping to resolve the pandemic without any qualifications, without anybody really even looking at a resume or going through all these strenuous things. You could come out making $27, $45 an hour and do really good work for 2 years or whatever. So anyways, I guess my question is, I don't understand why there are so many unlivable wages in the city of Syracuse. I mean, the example that was just given for caseworkers who are making low 50s is still much higher than a large number of people in the city who make less than $20,000 a year, but are expected to raise themselves out of poverty and are suggested to, in this optimal time, buy a house. It's not possible for many people. And I know, because during the pandemic I worked hard to buy my own house. Thank God I was able to do it. But knowing what goes into that is a struggle, and I'm fortunate to be single with no children. I guess what I'm wondering, after listening to this conversation and people bringing up concerns that I already was thinking about, if we have about 85% of non-for-profits that are within the city of Syracuse and don't pay taxes, why are they not pushed to at least make their base wages livable? I think a lot of the common theme we've been talking throughout the session, throughout our time at Citizens Academy, has put a lot of weight on Micron, but that's just one business. And I don't like the idea that we have a single point of failure or a single point of success that we're looking forward to be the saving grace for the future generations, when there are hundreds of businesses, maybe thousands, I don't know the math, within Syracuse that we could have made the same requirements for, and we just haven't. Contracts have to come up at some point. Why aren't they renegotiated? And then why are we putting the burden back on the citizens to say, hey, well, you just got to pay more property tax? It's not possible. I mean, you can do it, but you're putting more people in tight situations where now, instead of 2 jobs, it's 3 or 4. So my question really boils down to, why can't we, and maybe this isn't for people who are just managing the budget, but I feel like you may know people or have enough experience in the field to kind of give a little insight into that. I get that we're in a capitalist society, but at some point you have to think of the people over the business.
It's the local government up here, and we operate within constraints, right? No, it's not yours. So we, when I worked in New York, you gotta be quiet. You come sit, please. No, I can't throw it to you. You gotta listen. Okay, we'll leave in a minute, I promise. But in New York, the last financial crisis, because Syracuse has lived under this condition of economic scarcity for a long time, right? So we're very familiar with it on a really extreme level. And ARPA, the American Relief Plan, basically gave the city of Syracuse, $123 million, okay? And how did they get that money? I mean, they printed it out of nowhere, right? The central bank, right? Like, we have the ability to print money, but it's reserved to the kind of like the banking system, like the Congress gives the power to create money. But for the most part, we operate under conditions of scarcity. So no one at this table can really change that because we're all competing. We're like intentionally in the system of scarcity. And that's where I think it would take like major amounts of financial reform. So like the thing that really blew my mind a week ago was seeing the headline about the $100 payment to people who are at risk for violence, who got described as gang members, and the revulsion to it. Like, it was the first time I've had people, since I was a counselor, reaching out to me as budget director to yell at me about how stupid the city is. And I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. And at the same time, we just had a hearing today where we talked about the city had $56 million invested in Signature Bank, and so we had these banking failures that just happened, and basically these depositors, who we were, some of them, here with the city of Syracuse is $56 million, but everybody gets made whole like instantly. Like, they're basically like rewarding the risk in the financial system and creating money to stabilize everything all at once, kind of the way that you just witnessed with the pandemic, in a way that came to regular people. And I think that's where you do have to think about the nature of the financial system and the way in which money gets introduced into the system, and how it's typically given to like the richest people, and the rest of us are all fighting over it, and we're left fighting each other over like the silliest distinctions. So it's like, I make 30% more than you, so I'm not you, but we live in the same place, or you look different than me, so we're not the same, and we're going to fight over the little pieces that we get. But I do think you'd have to think about like true financial reform and the way in which money is introduced. And that was sort of what happened with the pandemic, is they hit the switches and gave it to regular people to go do the work. But it kind of does beg the question, like, why can't you do that more of the time? And we do have this inflation now because of it, so it's a tricky thing, because the inflation has consequences that are not easy, and we still exist within that model. So I don't think anyone here will have an answer, but because we all would be like, the mayor wants to pay people a fair wage, and then I'm sitting there, I want to pay a fair wage too, but I'm counting the beans, and I'm thinking about how we have to raise taxes, and then then people come and say, why are you raising taxes when we're still poor? And it's a really hard system we operate in a condition of scarcity pretty much all the time.
And I want to talk about the not-for-profits, as you talked about. When you talk about the not-for-profits in the city of Syracuse, they're doing most of the vital work. These are the people that they're barely making a living, and as I'm looking at it now, a lot of these people are closing, or they're combining. So when you talked about the not-for-profits paying, we want to pay. They want to pay their folks. But how do you pay from something you don't have? And then when you start pushing the scale up, you're going to lose these services that you need for the most vulnerable population. So again, as everybody up here keeps saying, it's a balancing act, because these services are so needed.
Yeah, I guess I'm just more so thinking about like the business that we choose to bring in, because we have a choice whether we accept it or not. It's like those same criteria that we're giving Micron, why can't we give certain businesses those same criteria? So that's not just one business like being the safe haven, we have multiple. And then I don't know how that would affect now.
But I mean, look at the minimum wage. Down in New York City, I don't know, it's $35, I don't know. But up here, we're at what, $12.85? So we're incrementally phased in to the minimum wage. So we'll never catch up, because that's not even a livable wage that they're offering. So
Proposing $21.25 now.
Yeah.
It's the newest proposal coming out of the state.
Is it for New York City, or is it for
it's the state as a whole?
By 2025 or 2027?
2026.
I'll be retired.
Yeah.
I'll be gone.
Robert, and then Ariana.
Hello, I'm Rob Walsh. I live over on Westcott. My question, my comment kind of piggybacks off of what we've been talking about here. There are a lot of cities that have done a citywide minimum wage, and that checks the box of something that's been done and done right. that the mayor wanted. It's something that brings in sales tax inside the city because everyone now has more wages, and so they're able to spend in the city. It eliminates the problem of Micron being a choke point, and at the same time brings in revenue from there. And everywhere that they've raised those minimum wages, you have seen increases in business startups. You've seen growth and none of the doom and gloom that everybody initially talked about. This has been going on for a long time now. Seattle did it like 10 years ago almost, and it was 15 then, and I think they're up to like 20 now. So I feel like that might be a way that we can marry all these things together. Like, what would it take to get a citywide minimum wage? Because that, I think, would really improve all of these things, because we do have a lot of business here. We have Syracuse University here. Maybe we don't need to tax them. Make sure everyone on that campus is paid $21, $22. We don't need to wait for the city or the state to get around to it if they ever do. So that's my question. And like, you know, all the fast food places, McDonald's, make them pay $21 an hour. People get $25 an hour in Europe from McDonald's doing the same job. Like, why can't we have that here? So that's my comment.
I would, my only thought to that is, I think Syracuse is a small city. I don't think we're Seattle. I mean, a countywide minimum wage may be more feasible than a citywide minimum wage for competition alone. I mean, we hear, when I was on, once again, city council or the ledge, I always represented a city district, and trying to pull businesses into downtown. I mean, we're in a pretty good spot right now with businesses moving back downtown. You know, development in Sibley's building and a few others, JMA, obviously the ones that you've seen. But those are struggles because they're saying, now you want us to pay our, and let me say this too, I do think that some of the major corporations, especially the big ones, SU, for most purposes, they make that money already. The minimum wage won't affect the big businesses. I think you're going to penalize the smaller businesses, and then you're going to drive them to not do business within the city. Is the balancing act there again that we keep using that? You know, right now I can't tell you how many fights we have about parking. Who's paying for the parking? Who owns the parking garage? We need free parking. Nobody wants to pay for parking. I mean, parking is an unbelievable thing that we, as, I don't know if it's a central New York thing or if it's nobody wants to pay for parking, and everybody wants to park outside the front door of their office and make $100,000 a year. So when we figure that out, we're all going to be in good shape. But I don't think a citywide minimum wage is feasible, because I think you'd really be pushing those middle of the road, maybe mom and pop, grassroots, all those, you know, nice cliches that we as electeds like to use. Those type of businesses, they're going to view that as a penalty, and they're going to say, wait a minute, I can be in the town of Salina, or I could be in the town of DeWitt, where I'm closer to Syracuse University than if I'm downtown, and I'm going to benefit from that, but I could pay my employees what the market will bear. That's another thing that it's nonprofits are dying for employees right now. I mean, they're nonprofit world. I say they underpay, but they underpay because they don't have the revenues to pay. And then, we've had some discussion here about, well, why are the nonprofits? Why aren't they taxed? We tax them. How are they going to pay anybody? I mean, you really are going to. They sound like good things at the front end, but when you really put them into practicality, it becomes, you want me to pay taxes, you want me to pay minimum wage, you want me to stay here, you want me to hire, but I don't have the revenues to do those things. And that's the part of that I hear almost daily from people is, help me succeed with a model that you're trying to push where everybody's happy, and it's a hard one. And I want to park outside my office. So
I do want to push back on just a little bit. I don't want to monopolize too much time here, but most of the small businesses and the medium-sized businesses, I think, especially the ones that are service-based, they will benefit from this. And this has been shown everywhere that it's done. You don't have to be a huge city to do this. Smaller cities have done this. And it always works this way. Like, why don't nonprofits have any money? Well, because nobody can afford to donate to them unless they're incredibly wealthy or a business.
True.
Like, why are the
Well, they're paying their college debt and they're paying a more expensive house and their car costs quadruple.
why the sandwich shops having trouble staying in business? Because no one can buy a sandwich anymore. But if everyone is making more money, then those businesses will be able to succeed. They'll be able to flourish. And sure, maybe a couple will leave, but that's going to just leave a whole city full of people making a livable wage that another business will come in and immediately capitalize on.
And I'm going to push back the other way to say now $25 an hour, and I should have been able to do this math in my head, but $25 an hour, 40 hours a week, it's $52,000 to flip burgers at McDonald's. And I don't begrudge somebody who's flipping burgers at McDonald's. I just want to make sure that what does that do to the county of Onondaga, who's hiring caseworkers in the low 50s who have 6 years of education, and now we're like, okay, now we got to pay the caseworkers $75,000 because they have to go here. Then we got to tax you more because we got to pay that person.
But
it's a non-stopping
you gotta
cycle.
Think about where does the money come from? Right. The money does not come from fiat. Pay people more. We live in a system where it's a credit-based money system. Okay, so you want more money circulating in the economy. You need to get your credit up. You got to take out loans. You got to spend the money. That's what happens. That's why in places like Seattle that are expensive, where that kind of thing happens, you have lots of people with lots of money taking out lots of loans and lots of debt, and there's a lot of money circulating. We live in a credit-based money system. You want to escape poverty? Collectively, we need to improve our credit. Individuals within our community who are not creditworthy, who are making bad choices and are excluded from the financial system because of, well, both like a combination of their legacy inheritance where they're starting, but also choices that they are making, because people can make better choices to improve their credit and grow slowly. But it is slow, it's not a quick fix. But I don't think the fiat also has its limit. It has its limit in the existing system, which I think we are not overthrowing.
But good discussion. You're not wrong. It's just, how do you get there?
I mean, because we have to think about some of the things that we do, right? Because we had a meeting in here a couple of weeks ago and talking about something the city wanted to do. And we had a whole room full of landlords. And what we were trying to do, landlord made the comment, well, you do that to us, we just pass it on to the tenant. So now you have a low-income tenant that's going to pick up that cost because we sat here and thought about how to make something else happen that they're telling us to our face they're going to pass it to the tenant. So it's a no-win.
Yeah. I mean, like, everybody just deserves angel wings because this is really serious. It's really.
It is.
Hard.
I could use some of those. And so can Tim.
My name is Krista McLean, and I live in Liverpool, but I work for Hillside for a nonprofit. And I was a hiring person, so we really had a deficit. We just revamped to try to pay people more to get people in the door. It's still not enough, so this conversation is definitely very vital. But my passion is going to pivot me back to education, and it's nice to hear about all the things that are going on and just even working with the student, I was working with a senior, there's a village of people working to try to get him to graduate, but he's not there graduating. So I feel like there's a village of people working, trying to get the community to be better. But then we have, like I work at Henniger, there's supposed to be 1,500 kids there, on average there's 900. I worked with all 5 principals of the high school because I was running an alternative program for seniors that weren't going to graduate. And they all have binders of their seniors, and they're in line from green, yellow, and red. Green, good to go. Yellow, we're going to work with them, see what we can do. Red, they kind of they didn't have enough resources to get to them, so they were not graduating. They were focusing on the yellow. All 5 high schools had that binder. So my thought went to, where are the reds going? They're not graduating, and every single year they're not graduating, so that's adding to violence, unemployment. The kids are graduating with 4th grade reading levels, so they're not going to be able to get any of the jobs that you guys are talking about. And I've been doing this now since 2010, and there's a lot of smart kids out there, and there's a lot of people trying to help them, but they're really low on resources. They have attendance teams that go out and try to get the kids in, but they're not getting them back in like they need to. Have you guys had conversations about how we can ensure that our kids are being educated and how you can support the schools financially? Because it really does come to the budget. They're low on staff, they're low on people to try to get these kids, but financially, how can we assist them in getting those kids coming? Because that's when all of this stuff is going to start working. It'll start working when we have educated citizens in here, and I'm seeing it. It's very frustrating to see a senior graduate with a 4th grade reading level. They graduated. They can't go, they're not going to be able to be good at OCC. They can't write emails. They write text. But they're still in 12th grade graduating. Those are the ones graduating, not even the ones that didn't. So honestly, this conversation is great, but I see a lot of kids that are not going to be able to access anything that you guys are doing because they don't have the education to do so. And a lot of times they're just stuck on the street, like living, trying to figure out how they're going to get to the next page because a lot of times they're taking care of themselves. So my ultimate question is, have you guys talked about innovative ways to be able to get the kids educated and to support the school district on ensuring that when they're in school, they're actually getting their education?
There's a lot of conversation going on, but I'm going to tell you the first thing you need to start is with your school board. They're your elected officials as well. So when you're talking about the school, as city councilor, I can't overstep the school board. That's their job to come to us and tell us what they need. And when you talk about resources, if I'm not mistaken, I think the school district got an extra $45 million or something with this pandemic money. So there are some resources there. So they did get a nice windfall. But I think that this conversation is with the school board, who are your elected.
There were many years, and Helen, I don't remember if it was at the beginning of your time on the council or at least with the Syracuse City School District, where there was financial, I mean, they were laying people off. There was, how are we going to close the budget gap? They were borrowing from future revenues, which my head almost exploded when I heard what they were doing. But they had to try to make ends meet to keep people in place that they had in place. But I have to say, I don't think in the last 6, 7, 8 years, we haven't had a contested budget vote in a county district. I mean, it's sad to say, but some of these districts' biggest controversy is, what sports field they're putting, what turf sports field they're putting in, not can we hire or do we have a lack of resources. I think the school district has financial resources that they need. The socioeconomic issues you're discussing that are as heart-wrenching as possible. My wife teaches at Corcoran. I mean, I hear it regularly. But yeah, that's her.
I saw your name.
If you like her, she's my wife. If you don't, I don't know her. Oh, I forgot I'm on live stream. But we hear it regularly, and where does that start? Because now schools feed kids. They're I'm going to sound like a real jerk. Somebody's got to take responsibility at home. I mean, it sounds like a really jerk thing to say, and it probably is. But the schools provide an awful lot of resources, from counseling, from food, from education, I watch what my wife does for students. I watch what other teachers do for students. They hold their hands to get them to graduate, to do what they can do. So if those folks that are in a red situation that is heart-wrenching and awful and sad as possible, I don't know how you get there, because I think our schools do a tremendous job trying, including Hillside. I mean, we watch what the county provides in financial assistance to school district for mental health needs. That has just gone up because we had a little more pandemic money. I mean, that seems to be another popular topic, but there really wasn't a huge budget issue even pre-pandemic. It was not great, but it was okay. But man, I wish there was the magic wand. I'd be lying to you if I said you can throw more money at this and fix it. I don't think you can. Something has got to give.
This is what I think, and that's just my opinion, because when we talked about consensus and they talked about the school districts that nobody wanted to talk about, okay? So when I looked at it, because I was in the same mindset, you have Corcoran on this hill right here, and then right down the street you got West Hill. Mm-hmm. But these kids can't cross boundaries, but they're right in the same neighborhood. So I really, they should. I think they should see too, and I think that our kids in the city, they would get a better education, they would learn more, but again, we have our fiefdoms, and we don't want to cross them over.
STEAM is an interesting concept with that, to draw from all districts. That is the
first state,
the first
countywide school.
Yeah, the first countywide school, which can help. But Tim hated the item. Tim, will you speak to your proposal?
Well, after I ran against Ryan McMahon for county legislature in 2015, and I lost, and the paper gave me a guest column for a year, and I wrote a bunch of different things about like the racialized education system and ideas for how to do it, and kind of like different ways to mix it up. But one thing I'll say, because you've witnessed this suffering for this whole time, and I know it's hard for all of you, probably harder for you than me, but like I went to Henniger in '96. There were 700 kids in my freshman class. I graduated in 2000, thankfully. There were 350 in my graduating class. That included all the alternative programs, right? So what you're saying has been the case, and then I think the pandemic made it so probably a bunch of kids who wouldn't have traditionally graduated, but they still weren't really much more capable, because let's tell the truth, the scores are real low. But there is this urge, you're watching, right? Like my kids, initially, they're eating carrots, and they were eating oranges, but then everyone wants cookies and chips, and you're helping. I get it. You're helping. This is what we do as a society. We help with the thing that's no good, right? They did not have a phone. I did not give them my phone, because you want to know what? They're a nightmare with my phone. So like, I've made them suffer through this for a couple-hour thing, which people are like, I went to the Democratic interviews for the Democratic committee or whatever, and I sat there for 2 hours, and I made them sit there, and I didn't bring any toys, because frankly I just didn't think of it, and some woman came up to me afterwards and was like, why are you torturing your children like this? And I was like, I thought they were pretty good. But like, they are better for it, right? Like, they learn to be quiet, they learn to control themselves, and too many kids do not. Like, who is responsible? There's no amount of government, everything that can fix bad decision making by an individual, okay? So I'm totally a Democrat who believes you need a system that makes it possible for people to make good choices, even when they make bad choices. You make bad choices and bad choices and bad choices, we give you another choice. But you know who needs to make the choice? You, okay? And no government's fixing you if you don't make the good choice. And there's like this disservice where we don't tell that to people. We don't tell it to our children. We don't tell it to the kids. And I feel like I was blessed to have had teachers who were like, you know what, the school district did you a disservice and you think you're smart, but you better work real hard when you get to college, because you got a deficit because you've been surrounded by failure. And like, I sort of believed that. And it's like, no one's going to fix that but you. You need to work. You need to make good decisions. And that was, even right after I graduated from SU, I ended up teaching in city schools, totally unqualified. I had a degree, so they put me in a Spanish teaching position. So I'm a white guy who hablo español, you know, but I was qualified. And what was my point? But the kids in the classroom were like, you're different because you expect all of us to make the right choice. And like, I actually had felt like I benefited from racist expectations being in the city school my whole life. It was like, always like, this chaos, not you. You know better, right? But it's so the expectation setting needs to be there, and we've like lost the ability to say, I expect more of everyone, and to see it, and we give hugs and chips and sodas and donuts and pizza, and we think they're going to be better for it, and they're not.
But is that not the role of the Department of Children and Family Services, to hold families accountable, to make sure that their children are?
Well, it's to make sure that the children are safe. I mean, it's a base requirement, a legal requirement that children are in a safe environment. It's not the government's job to make sure they're raising their kids right.
But it's not the law that they go to school. I'm sorry, say it again.
Yeah, but that's truancy, and that's enforced by not us.
Okay.
So
yeah. So I have kids who have not been to school, been stepped foot in my building, in a K-8 building for 2 years.
It's a problem.
Who holds that family accountable? I have no teeth. Does DCFS have teeth? Does the Justice? I read an article that the family in like Mexico, New York, the parents were arrested because their kid missed 50 days of a 180-day school year. I have kids that haven't been in school in 2 years. So where are we falling behind with that level of accountability that we're holding families? Where does DCFS need more teeth? Like who does that?
I don't know who enforces the truancy in schools.
Clearly no is the short answer.
No one.
The school, though.
Yeah, the school.
No.
We refer out. All right, we are running out of time. I'm sorry.
Nobody does it.
They don't.
I think also a little off topic though. This is,
We certainly don't do that.
but can we give our panelists a huge round of applause? And also Tim, an extra round of applause. I like it. I get distracted if I hear like a cough. All right, couple of quick announcements, and then I will cut you guys loose. So the first one, I want you guys to give yourselves a round of applause. This was 100% graduation rate. Every single one of you graduated. That's incredible. So thank you so much for showing up.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so graduation will be next week on a Tuesday. It'll be at the Rescue Mission Alliance on Gifford Street. If you can come by 5, that would be really great because it is going to be packed. We have you fill out an in-person evaluation, and then we have a student dialogue to talk about your experience with the program, how we can improve it, what you learned, and just have a dialogue about your experience here. With that, so we want you guys to get in early. We're going to try and live stream it because, like I said, we can't do families only because we don't have the space. So we will try and live stream it, and I'm going to try and kick that off around 7 o'clock, or at least like 7:05, as we get prepped and ready. So I will send you guys the link for that. We will also be choosing a student speaker from our distinguished graduates. So if you are a distinguished graduate, we will be choosing somebody partially by random, but we did get a couple referrals from your classmates, so we will take a look to see. And that student speaker will only be speaking for a couple of minutes, that's the key, about their experience with Citizens Academy. We will also be working to get a keynote speaker, so stay tuned with that. And finally, we are looking for a program manager to take my position. So if you know anyone or you want to apply, please do. Applications close April 7th. We just want a resume and a cover letter. So otherwise, we will see you all on Tuesday. And also take a look for the tour. So, oh yes, Tracy.
Kristen will be selling her glasses at Buried Acorn on Wednesday, next Saturday, April 8th. So if you have the opportunity to go and check it out, she is one of our peers.
Yes, thank you. And also, we will try and do a tour sometime in the next couple of days. I'll send out an email. And please take off your